Empaths are known for their ability to feel deeply, to understand what others can't express, and to give compassion even when it's undeserved. But one day, something shifts. After being misunderstood, dismissed, and taken for granted too many times, the empath stops explaining, not because they've stopped caring, but because they've finally realized that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They've spent years trying to make others understand their heart, only to be told they're too sensitive, too emotional, or overthinking everything. And eventually, the empath learns a painful truth. Explaining yourself to people who don't listen is another form of self-betrayal. When an empath stops explaining, it's not indifference, it's evolution. It's the moment they choose peace over proving, self-respect over validation, and emotional clarity over constant misunderstanding. In this video, we'll explore why empaths stop explaining their feelings and how that silence becomes the beginning of true freedom. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Brainy Empath, hit the like button, and comment below. I no longer explain my piece. Because once you stop explaining your feelings, you stop giving people the power to dismiss them. They realize explaining doesn't create understanding. There comes a moment when every empath realizes that no amount of words can make someone feel what they refuse to see. You could pour your heart out, explain your intentions, clarify every detail of your feelings, but it doesn't matter to people who only listen to defend their ego. Empaths often believe that if they just explain themselves clearly enough, others will finally understand. But eventually you learn that some people don't want clarity, they want control. They don't seek to understand you, they seek to win the conversation. You begin to notice how your attempts to explain only lead to more confusion and exhaustion. Every time you try to justify why you felt hurt or distant, you end up walking away even more misunderstood. It's not because your words lack depth, it's because you're speaking a language the other person has no intention of learning. And that's when the truth starts to sink in. You can't teach empathy to someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. For an empath, this realization is painful but freeing. You've likely spent years thinking that communication could fix everything, that if you explained calmly, people would finally respect your heart. But instead, you learned that the wrong people twist your explanations into weaknesses. They turn your honesty into ammunition, your sensitivity into a flaw, and your vulnerability into a weapon against you. So you stop explaining, not because you've given up, but because you've grown up. You understand that peace doesn't come from being understood, it comes from knowing your truth without needing others to validate it. Silence stops being awkward and starts feeling sacred. It becomes your shield, your filter, your quiet form of wisdom. When you stop explaining your feelings, something powerful happens. Your energy shifts from convincing others to protecting yourself. You start speaking less and observing more. You realize that real understanding isn't proven by how much you talk, it's proven by how people treat your silence. And when you find someone who doesn't need 1,000 words to understand you, you'll finally see that empathy was never about explanation, it was about connection. They see how their vulnerability gets used against them. Empaths are born with a natural instinct to open up. They believe in honesty, transparency, and emotional connection, but over time, they start to notice a painful pattern. The very people they open up to are often the ones who use their words against them. They share their deepest fears only to have them mocked later during arguments. They express their emotions only to be told they're too sensitive or overreacting. And that's when the empath learns one of the hardest lessons. Vulnerability is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. When an empath explains their feelings, it's never about manipulation or control. It's an act of trust. It's them saying, I want you to understand me so we can connect. But to the wrong person, especially someone emotionally immature or self-centered, that openness becomes an opportunity. They take what you share and twist it into something that serves them. They learn your triggers, your guilt, your empathy, and they use those things to keep control. It's not connection to them, it's information. After enough experiences like this, empaths stop explaining, not because they've lost the ability to feel, but because they've learned to protect it. They realize that giving someone access to their emotions is a privilege, not an obligation. They begin to see that some people only listen to collect details they can later weaponize. So instead of pouring out their heart to everyone, they reserve that energy for those who prove they're emotionally safe. This change confuses others. The empath's calmness, once mistaken for weakness, now becomes mystery. They no longer rush to defend their feelings or justify their reactions. They understand that the more you explain yourself to people who twist your words, the more power you hand them. Silence then becomes an act of self-respect. A line that says, "You don't get to access me that deeply anymore." And in that silence, the empath doesn't feel smaller, they feel stronger. Because protecting your emotional depth isn't coldness, it's wisdom. It's realizing that not everyone can handle the honesty of your heart. And you no longer need to shrink yourself just to be understood by people who never truly listened in the first place. They learn that peace feels better than being right. For most empaths, the need to be understood comes from love, not ego. You don't argue to win. You argue because you want clarity, harmony, and emotional honesty. You want to fix what's broken, clear the misunderstanding, and bring peace back into the connection. But over time, you realize something profound. Not everyone wants peace. Some people crave conflict because it gives them control, and trying to reason with them only drains your energy. That's the moment when you finally learn that peace feels better than being right. It's a difficult shift because for an empath, being misunderstood can feel almost unbearable. You've spent so much of your life trying to prove your intentions, trying to explain your side, hoping that if you just say it the right way, they'll finally see your heart. But they don't. They twist your clarity into confusion, your honesty into blame, and your calm into weakness. And one day, something in you breaks, not out of anger, but exhaustion. You stop arguing not because you have no words left, but because you realize your peace is too expensive to spend on chaos. That's when silence starts to feel like healing. You stop trying to prove your truth to people who've already decided not to understand you. You begin to recognize that validation isn't proof of truth, it's a reflection of someone else's awareness. And if they don't have the emotional maturity to understand you, no amount of explaining will ever bridge that gap. So instead, you choose distance, you choose stillness, you choose yourself. The first time you walk away without defending yourself, it feels strange, almost empty. But then, slowly you feel lighter. You realize how much peace comes from letting go of battles that were never meant to be won. You understand that you don't need to be right in someone else's story to know your own worth. That's the quiet superpower of an evolved empath. Learning that truth doesn't need to be shouted, explained, or proven. It just needs to be lived. Because when peace becomes your priority, validation becomes irrelevant, and that's when your energy finally starts working for you, not against you. They recognize emotional energy as currency. Empaths eventually realize that emotional energy is just like money. It's valuable, limited, and easily wasted if given to the wrong people. Every conversation, every explanation, every moment spent trying to make someone understand you has a cost. When you're constantly explaining your feelings to people who dismiss, twist, or ignore them, you're not communicating, you're depleting yourself. And the more you give, the less clarity and peace you have left for yourself. It takes time for empaths to see this. At first, you think that being open is always the right thing to do. You share, you explain, you help others see your perspective, believing it'll build understanding. But instead, you start noticing that some people walk away from these conversations feeling powerful, while you walk away feeling empty. You feel drained, anxious, or guilty. Even though you were the one trying to create peace, that's when it hits you. Your energy is being spent, but not respected. So you begin to guard it differently. You stop offering explanations to people who listen with their ego instead of their heart. You stop wasting words on those who only hear what confirms their narrative. You start to measure your emotional exchanges like an investor, asking yourself, does this person truly care about understanding me, or do they just want to defend themselves? That shift changes everything. You stop over-explaining, you stop fixing, you stop apologizing for how you feel. You realize that your energy is your most valuable asset, and you get to choose where it goes. You start spending it on people who bring peace instead of confusion, and you find that your inner world becomes calmer, sharper, and stronger. This is when empaths grow powerful, when they learn that not everyone deserves emotional access. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's smart. It's the act of finally respecting yourself as much as you've respected everyone else. You no longer explain to be understood, you conserve to stay grounded. And in that quiet control, you discover a new kind of peace, one built not on words, but on boundaries. They accept that some people hear only what fits their narrative. One of the hardest lessons for an empath is realizing that some people never truly listened. They just waited for their turn to defend themselves. You could explain your feelings with honesty, vulnerability, and care, but they'd still twist your words into something that protects their ego. At first, you try harder, you rephrase, you stay calm, you overthink your tone, but no matter how clearly you speak, they only hear what confirms their version of the story. That's when you finally see the truth. Some people don't want understanding, they want to be right. This realization hits deep. For an empath, connection is sacred. It's not about winning, it's about healing. You explain not to prove, but to bring peace. But when every attempt turns into defensiveness or blame, it drains your spirit. You start to see that no amount of explaining will ever change a person who's committed to misunderstanding you. Their ego filters every word you say through self-preservation, not empathy. And the more you try to be understood, the more you feel invisible. So one day you stop. You stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to repair conversations that were never meant to be mutual. Instead, you choose silence, not as surrender, but as protection. Your quiet becomes your boundary. You no longer chase closure or clarity from those who can't offer it. You let them hold onto their version of the story if it makes them feel powerful, because you finally understand that your peace is worth more than their approval. Silence for an empath is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you stop playing the emotional game that others keep rewriting to their advantage. And though it may confuse or even anger them, that silence speaks louder than anything you could have said. It says, I see through you now, and I choose peace over proving myself. When you reach this level of awareness, you stop being controlled by misunderstanding. You no longer need to correct their narrative, you simply walk away from it. And in doing so, you reclaim something far more valuable than being right, your emotional freedom. They understand that validation isn't the same as connection. For most empaths, validation once felt like love. When someone finally seemed to get you, it felt like being seen for the first time, a rare kind of safety. But over time, you start to realize that being understood isn't the same as being valued. Some people only validate you when it serves them, when it keeps you calm, loyal, or emotionally available. That's not connection, that's management. And once you recognize it, something inside you shifts. You stop chasing understanding as proof of worth. You learn that real connection doesn't need convincing. It doesn't require explaining your every feeling or justifying your boundaries. It's mutual. Both people listen, both care, both respect the space between them. But when you're dealing with those who only see you as an emotional mirror for their needs, validation becomes conditional. They only understand you when you agree with them or make them comfortable. The moment you express something that challenges their control, that understanding disappears. That's when you begin to see validation for what it is, a temporary illusion of acceptance. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't sustain real closeness. You stop confusing empathy with obligation and stop mistaking acknowledgement for intimacy. You realize that if someone needs you to shrink your feelings just to keep the peace, that peace isn't real. This is where emotional maturity begins for the empath. You stop needing everyone to understand you because you finally understand yourself. You recognize that being seen by the wrong people only costs you energy. You start valuing quiet self-trust over noisy reassurance. And ironically, once you stop begging to be understood, you start attracting people who actually do understand, not because you explained yourself perfectly, but because they're emotionally present enough to listen. Validation might soothe the surface, but connection heals the core. When you stop chasing one, you create space for the other. You no longer beg to be seen. You choose to be around those who never make you question your worth in the first place. That's not detachment, it's evolution. They shift from explaining to observing. At some point, every empath realizes that words mean nothing without consistency. You've spent years explaining your intentions, your boundaries, your heart, only to watch people nod, promise, and then repeat the same behavior that hurt you. Eventually, you learn that it's not your job to convince anyone to treat you right, so you stop explaining and start observing. You stop trying to change minds and start studying patterns. This shift feels quiet but powerful. You no longer rush to defend yourself or overanalyze what someone said. You pay attention to what they do when you're not speaking. Do they respect your boundaries when you're silent? Do they show up without being asked? Do their actions match their apologies? Those small details reveal more truth than any long conversation ever could. You begin to understand that real understanding doesn't come from explanations, it comes from observation. Empaths by nature are deep feelers. You sense emotions before they're spoken, intentions before they're revealed. But before this transformation, that sensitivity often made you overly forgiving. You wanted to believe in potential more than patterns. Now you've grown wiser. You realize that people will show you who they are in repetition, not in words. And you don't need to argue with what's already clear. This mindset brings peace. You stop chasing closure because you've learned to see truth in silence. You stop wasting emotional energy trying to make people care because genuine care is visible, not verbal. You start trusting what people show you over what they say, and that clarity feels liberating. Observation becomes your boundary. Instead of explaining yourself into exhaustion, you sit back and let reality reveal itself. You no longer fall for charm, guilt, or potential. You see things exactly as they are, and that's where your power begins. When you stop talking and start noticing, you gain control, not through reaction, but through awareness. You finally realize that people tell on themselves through behavior, and your job isn't to fix it, it's to decide whether you stay or walk away. They choose stillness over justification. There comes a quiet turning point for every empath, the moment you realize that explaining yourself doesn't bring peace, it drains it. You've spent so much time trying to make others understand your heart, your intentions, your pain. You've repeated yourself, softened your tone, even taken blame just to keep the peace. But eventually you see that peace built on over-explaining isn't peace at all. It's control disguised as understanding. That's when you stop. You stop defending, stop proving, stop justifying. You choose stillness. The stillness isn't silence from fear, it's silence from strength. You begin to understand that your calm is your boundary, not your weakness. You no longer feel the need to explain why you said no, why you walked away, or why you're done. The people who truly care don't need explanations. They feel your truth through your actions, and the ones who demand justification were never listening in the first place. They were waiting for a way to twist your words. Choosing stillness is choosing power. You watch as the noise around you gets louder when you stop participating in it. People who thrived on your reactions suddenly lose their control. Those who misunderstood your empathy begin to see your silence as distant, but it's not distance, it's clarity. You've simply stopped performing emotional labor for people who never intended to meet you halfway. In this space of quiet, you find something sacred, peace that doesn't need permission. You stop chasing understanding and start creating it within yourself. You realize that you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your energy. Your stillness becomes a declaration, one that says, I'm no longer explaining peace to those who only understand chaos. This is where emotional maturity reaches its highest form. You no longer fight to be heard. You embody calm so completely that nothing outside of you can disturb it. You understand that justification is a trap. It keeps you tied to misunderstanding. But stillness is freedom. It's the moment you take back your power, your voice, and your peace, and no one gets to rewrite that silence again. When empaths stop explaining, something profound happens. They stop bleeding energy into the wrong places. They stop chasing validation from those who were never meant to understand them, and instead, they build an inner peace that no one can shake. You stop needing to be heard because you finally hear yourself. That's where your real strength begins, not in words, but in calm, self-assured silence. If this message resonates with you, remember, your peace isn't something you explain. It's something you protect. Stay grounded, stay aware, and keep growing in your quiet power. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you reached the point where you stopped explaining yourself? Subscribe to Brainy Empath for more deep emotional insights and healing psychology content made for people who feel deeply, think deeply, and are finally learning to let go.